Hello, good morning. I hope everyone is having a great day, and I hope you're ready to overthink about overthinking a little bit. So, I'm gonna go ahead and get started as, let me close this. I'm gonna go ahead and jump in and get started as you guys kind of come in and join. Go ahead and say hi, say anything, whatever you want for the day, ask questions. And for those of you who catch in the replay or later in the evening, go ahead and leave comments and stuff as to what you're thinking as we go through. So today for our topic, we're going to be talking about overthinking and reclaiming your energy a little bit. So the main things we're going to talk about today, I'm going to go over the chronic aspect of overthinking, and then we'll be talking about why it's so draining. Then we'll go into where it comes from, and then maybe a tool, maybe two if you're lucky, and then I'll do a little bit of review. So if that works for you guys, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. So getting into the chronic aspect of overthinking, it's kind of the idea that you're going over a scenario 20 plus times in your head. You're going over a situation for how it could evolve, what could happen in it, how a conversation could play out. You're playing through every single aspect of an interaction or a thought or anything like that. And I used to do this like crazy. I'd lay in bed at night thinking about a conversation I had earlier that day or a meeting I have the next day and what's going to happen in that meeting and how it plays out. And I would have full conversations in my head. And then when I'd actually get to the conversation, so with my husband, it was always awesome because I'd tell him, I've already had this conversation. We've already had this discussion in my head, and I already know the result. And he'd be like, oh, okay. And I'd bring it up, and he'd totally shock me. He'd respond completely differently than everything that I had imagined he would say or how he would respond or what he would do. So that's kind of the aspect of the chronic overthinking and how it plays out. And one part of it is that you also struggle with really small decisions, like what am I going to get for lunch? It's a relatively small decision. Are you going to bring lunch? Are you going to buy something, while you're at work? Are you going to go pick something up somewhere? Are you going to go out to lunch? What are you going to do? That tends to be kind of a big deal for overthinkers, just those little small decisions. And I'll get into why here in a little bit, but I'll tell you it's kind of self-trust. So that's part of it, is that you just don't really trust yourself fully. So the other thing is too, is that you're second guessing a little bit. You second guess almost every single decision that you make. If it's I'm gonna bring my lunch in with me to work. Well, maybe I shouldn't. Maybe something's gonna happen today. Maybe, well, the last time I did, I ended up not eating lunch. Things like that where you're second guessing. Buyer's remorse is huge for overthinkers. So it's a big deal, and it really becomes mentally exhausting. You get what's called decision fatigue, where you've thought so much about something that you don't know how to stop thinking about it, and then you just get exhausted from it, and you're worn out, and you haven't even necessarily done anything, but you're exhausted. So I'm gonna talk about that in just a second. But the big part of it is you have a really busy brain. There's just constantly things going on, and if you think about it, they're like on Instagram and stuff now, there's a lot of neurodivergent and neurotypical and brain thoughts and activity, and people are like, oh my gosh, I'm neurodivergent, I think constantly. And part of that to take into consideration is that you actually think with an inner monologue, and only about 40% of the population actually thinks with an inner monologue. And so if you think about communication, so you talk to yourself constantly versus someone who would be considered neurotypical. They actually think with um, abstract thought, and so it's not a constant voice in their head. It's not constant thinking. It's not the do 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 do. It's not constant things like that going on in their heads. So they have a much calmer mind, and they're at a bit more peace than those of us who have an inner monologue. So if you have the inner monologue, think about your communication patterns and how you communicate with somebody who doesn't necessarily have an inner monologue, because um, they haven't had the conversation. They haven't thought about it. They've talked to you, then they move on. There's no rethinking about the conversation. There's no readdressing it. There's no thinking about the event. That it's gone. They're done. So they move past things. So if you're married to somebody who is like, we were done with the conversation, so I moved on. They do. They truly move on. They don't rethink about it and rethink about it. They don't readdress it. They don't second guess it. They just move on. And it's actually really cool if you think about it. So I'm kind of jealous of people like that, because I've had to work at calming my mind and stuff, and slowing that voice down and things. And you can do it. There's hope. You can totally do it. It just takes some practice and some work, and being able to identify when you're doing it. So going into why it's so draining, it's really because you're trying to predict every outcome, and you also think that you can think your way out of a situation, and the thing is you can't. This kind of gets into some similar areas as anxiety when we talked about it last week, because with anxiety, you think you can think your way out of a situation, and it gets your state kind of up and running and a little bit blood boiling, things like that. So you get the flushed skin. We talked about things like that, and the overthinking does that too. You can stay calmer with overthinking than when it's just overthinking, as opposed to like anxiety with overthinking. So it's a little bit different, that you're trying to think your way through every possible situation, every possible outcome, every possible conversation. And the thing is that usually you're not right. Usually you get into the situation, or at least for me, I could never predict what was going to happen. I could never get it right. Like, people would blow me away with the questions that I had never thought of that even being a potential question. So it usually blew me away. And then all that time thinking about it was just completely wasted. And so what you're trying to do is you're actually trying to think your way to safety. You're trying to control the situation, and you're actually trying to get to a state almost of perfection. And the thing to understand about that is that as humans, and in the human experience, we are flawed. There's really no such thing as perfection. It's really our flaws that make us so beautiful and human. So when we aim for the perfection, and that's our goal, or we don't even realize that's our goal, but that's what we're going for, we're kind of setting ourselves up for failure and some distress, some internal distress. And so it's that causes exhaustion when you're trying to stand up to an expectation that really doesn't exist, but you keep trying to hit that bar, and it doesn't happen. It kind of an example the other day. So I was downtown with my daughter, and there was a bride, and she was just frantic, and everything seemed to be going wrong. And I was just like, "Are you okay? Do you need anything? Is there anything I can do to help?" And she was like, "No, I'm just, oh my gosh, it's supposed to be this perfect day," and that's the expectation that she said. And so it was interesting, because my daughter was like, "Why does it have to be the perfect day? I don't get it." And that's the thing, is that as brides, we put this expectation on the day being perfect that we miss out. We're so focused on perfect that we miss out in the moment. And so how many of you went through your wedding day and don't even remember it afterwards because it was just this blur? Tons and tons and tons of people do that, and so it's hard. It's really hard to aim for that perfection because it doesn't exist. And so this is where you get into that decision fatigue, because you're constantly thinking about every single little possible solution, and then when it comes down to what am I having for dinner tonight, Mom? You can't do it. You don't want to do it. You don't want to deal with it. You're exhausted from all of the overthinking and all of the decisions that you made in your head that weren't even realized because you were just thinking and thinking and thinking about it. And so that's really hard. It's hard to deal with. It's hard to overcome, and you're constantly thinking about the what ifs. What if this happened? What if that happened? What if the sky falls down? What if there's, it's endless. It's constant, and the sad thing is you really can't predict the what ifs. You can kind of think about them, like what if a scenario for an exercise. You can think about some of the what ifs so that you're better prepared. Strange fact. So Waffle House actually has this massive book of how to respond in different situations for different scenarios, and it's actually a disaster relief book. And so it's funny because there are different agencies around the United States that base their hazards and disaster relief and everything based on a Waffle House. It's crazy. Look it up on YouTube. It's so funny that they're so intense with these scenarios and these situations. And the thing is that if a situation happens at a Waffle House and they don't know how to respond to it, it immediately goes into the next revision of this book. So it's crazy, but they always have answers and for every situation, because the situation has happened at a Waffle House. So like power goes out at a Waffle House, this is how they respond. And if a truck comes through a Waffle House, this is how they respond. So they have all these things that it's so funny to me. Anyways, sorry, total aside. So the whole thing about the overthinking is that there's really no rest and there's no resolution. Because you're still thinking about it after the fact, and you're thinking about it before, you were thinking about it during, now you're thinking about it after, and you can't rest if there's no resolution. You can't get a good night's sleep. You can't even get to sleep to get a good night's sleep, and then you're laying awake at 1 a.m. going through a scenario that you thought about before it, and you stressed about before it happened, and then it happened, and then now you're stressed about it after it happened. So that's the whole chronic overthinking and why it's so draining, because it takes energy just like exercise does. It's just like anxiety. It really builds up energy, and it's hard to maintain and stay in that heightened fight or flight state, and that's what you're doing to yourself. So basically where it comes from, just checking time real quick, where the overthinking comes from, I hate to tell you this, but it comes from fear. And so it in general, it's fear of being wrong, it's fear of disappointment, it's fear of failure, it's this constant fear, and then it's also not trusting yourself. And that's really hard for us to kind of admit sometimes, that we may not trust ourselves fully, because that goes into confidence, which guess what, I'm a confidence coach. So, but the fear that you might be wrong, or you might get something wrong, that kind of failure, that's a confidence issue. That's, oh my gosh, what if I get it wrong? Well, but what if you trusted yourself? What if you believed in yourself? What if you learned from those mistakes? What if you just kind of changed that little mind shift to not have to overthink about it? Because if you fail, you learn. And if you learn, you grow. We don't really grow and learn from successes. Like, it just happens. Woo, yay, it happened. But When we fail is when we actually learn, and we have the opportunity to grow. So every failure is really an opportunity in my eyes. But part of the overthinking is that it's it's your brain's way to protect you. Your nervous system thinks that it's protecting you by overthinking because it's preparing you for every possible situation, outcome, scenario. And so you continue to do it because it seems and it feels like maybe that's the natural progression. Maybe that's how I protect myself and how I keep myself safe and others around me safe. So you overthink. The thing is that it doesn't work. It's counterintuitive. So while you may think that you're keeping yourself safe, you're not. And so because really you're just making yourself exhausted, and then what happens when you're exhausted? You can't perform at your highest peak level. And so it's kind of this downward spiral event, and what happens, and it's really, like I said, based on that lack of self-trust, and that self-trust comes from confidence. So when we're lacking in confidence in an area, this is what happens. And so you can be very strong and confident in one area, and maybe you won't overthink in that area. You won't overprocess, you won't overthink, things like that. But then in another area, you're a little bit weaker, so you're insecure about it, and then you do overthink. You go through the processes and the circles through your head, and the cycles and the thought tornado and everything. I don't think I've told you guys about a thought tornado. So, I live in Alabama, so I think we're kind of coming out of tornado season. But the whole thing about thought and overthinking is that really thoughts are just that. It's just a thing. It's like it comes in on a cloud, and so you can watch it. You can watch it process, and you can watch the thought kind of come in, and either you can give it energy or you don't, and that's kind of your choice. And so if you don't give it energy, it just passes, and that's it. There's nothing to it, and so you don't focus on it, so it just passes, and that's all it was. It was just a thought. And then when you do focus on it, it gets more energy, and it kind of gains momentum, and it gains speed. And the next thing you know, that thought is just a tornado running around in your head, creating just devastation and destruction. It's horrendous. And so the power and the focus that we give our thoughts really creates that scenario, the overthinking, and that's kind of where it comes from. Is really we control our thoughts. And so, do you want to give it energy or do you not want to? The trick is really catching yourself in the moment. I know I'm focusing on that, and you can do pattern interrupts. And so, a pattern interrupt is basically like you can have your spouse do it if they see you overthinking, because sometimes our spouses, they just know, they see the wheels turning and they're like, she's in it. They can do things like ask you your favorite color, what your favorite pet is, what color's your car, things, what color's the sun, where is the sun, what's the color of the sky, things like that. Those are kind of factual events. Those, we know that to be true. And so when you're asked about that, your brain kind of stops and shifts focus. And so when you do a pattern interrupt like that, you can actually stop the overthinking. And so it's pretty cool. But when you can do it to yourself, it's awesome. If somebody else can help you with it, it's great too. It kind of helps with communication and dynamic and everything. So you can do that. But moving on into kind of, how much time do we have? Oh, about 10 minutes. Okay. So, some things you can do. I kind of got into the pattern interrupt, and so that's one of the ways that you can stop overthinking. Is you can shift your thought. You can direct it in another direction, redirect. And so the second that you do that, your brain kind of freezes up because it's like, whoa, what just happened? And it's just a pattern interrupt. People do this to us all the time accidentally. If you're kind of in your own little world walking down the street and somebody asks you a question, that's a pattern interrupt because it disturbs your thought process. And you may not even be able to get back to the thought that you were on as you were walking, and that can be a very good thing. That can be what you want. So there's the pattern interrupt. And then you can also ask yourself, what would I do if I trusted myself? So this kind of goes into the whole confidence building aspect of things. So if I trusted myself, would I bring lunch to work? Or would I get lunch? A version of me that trusts myself would do. And then you should get an answer. And that would be your intuition, your kind of all-knowing inside that actually trusts yourself, going, well, this is what we do, duh. And so that should help. If you ask yourself just what would I do if I trusted myself? Because it really goes to your basic instincts, and you're driving information from there. Plus, if you do that, you're able to move forward now. So you're able to move forward into the next thing, the next item, the next task for the day, the next thing you have to do. And so you're able to move forward. And then it's wonderful if you're laying in bed at night and you're thinking about a meeting you have the next day at work. And you're like, if I trusted myself, what would I do? Well, I'd let myself go to sleep because I can deal with this in the morning, because I know all my information, I know the facts, I know the data, and so I don't have to overthink this. So if I trusted myself, I'd go to sleep. And then you go to sleep. It's great. So you're able to move forward. And then it really decreases anxiety when you trust yourself and when you trust your decisions. And when you take action, you take actual inspired action, and you move forward into something, then you actually increase your energy. I know, shocker, right? So when you're not wasting energy overthinking and you actually take action towards something, you actually create dopamine, which is awesome, because you get energy, and your dopamine is kind of your addiction center, and so it's where you want it. It's like your pleasure center of the brain, and so your pleasure hormone. So when you create dopamine, your body's like, yeah. You just love it. So it's great to just feel the dopamine. It's because you've accomplished something. You made a decision. Congratulations. Move forward into life. So it's pretty awesome how you can learn to give yourself dopamine hits to move forward and have more energy and things like that. And so like for me, I do my journaling every day. So I have my tasks for the day, and every time I get to cross something off, it's like, woo, dopamine hit. But that creates more energy for me to then put towards the next task, because what I want to do is get another dopamine hit, so I want to accomplish another thing. So that helps. And then, so here's a bonus one. I love this one. It's incredible. So if you ask yourself, what's your next idea? Did you do it? So if you're laying in bed at night and just thoughts just racing, and it's 11, 12, 1 a.m. and you ask yourself, because you can't get those thoughts to stop, ask yourself, what's your next idea? Your brain will stop. It's like, what do you mean? What do you mean my next idea? What are you talking about? And you get a few minutes of just quiet. It's amazing. It's so cool. I love it. I do it all the time. What's your next idea? When I recognize and I feel those thoughts starting to race, what if, that just asking yourself that simple question. It's amazing. So that is, so 3 tips. You actually got 3 tips today, so that's awesome. 3 kind of tools. So you got the pattern interrupt, you got the what would I do if I trusted myself, which if you start doing that, you'll probably start building confidence. Well, you will start building confidence a little bit in that area too. There are other things you can do more for building confidence, but that's kind of a little tool. And then the what's your next idea? So, 3 fun tips on how to calm the overthinking and move into action. So, just kind of a review today, we talked about the chronic overthinking, um, how to kind of identify it and what it actually is, why it's so exhausting, and then where it comes from. So, it's important to know where it's coming from because if you don't know where the overthinking is coming from, it's hard to identify it and go, that's where I need work. So once you identify it, that's awesome. And then breaking the cycle. So with the pattern interrupt and the 2 questions, those are, I guess it's kind of 3 questions because the pattern interrupt is being asked a question. But so you got all those, and then so I hope you guys enjoyed today. I'm about 4 minutes early, which is awesome, right? 26 minute little live. So I hope this helped you guys out today, and if the lives are helping, then let me know, or shoot me a message. If you have a question you want asked, go ahead and send me a question, and I'll try to do a live on it. I do have a list right now of a bunch of the lives I want to do, so I'm going to work on those. But next week I'm going to go live on burnout traps. So kind of why you get burnout and how to overcome it a little bit and how to identify the burnout traps. So spoiler alert, a lot of it has to do with confidence. So I love it. But anyways, if you have questions or anything, just let me know. And I really hope that you have a great day. Okay? Go out, love, thrive, enjoy everything that you do. And I'll talk to you next week.